Buenas noches, profesor. Buenas noches, profesor. Buenas noches. Siendo las 9 en punto, damos inicio a nuestra sesión número 8 y final de literatura infantil con el profesor Santos Monroy. Profe, paso a compartir los parámetros de la sesión.
Vale, está bien.
Estudiantes, estos son los parámetros de las sesiones por videoconferencia. Las sesiones se graban, o sea que podemos verlas nuevamente en la plataforma virtual. Les solicitamos que por favor silencien su micrófono y puedan activarlo cuando quieran hacer consultas o aportes con el permiso del docente. Les pedimos que mantengan su cámara activa. De no poder hacerlo, enviar sus excusas por el chat de Zoom. O de lo contrario, serán retirados de la sesión y les serán restados puntos de letra o valoración del docente. Pero como moderador es facilitar y apoyar en la parte técnica. Las consultas las hacemos por el chat personal o general. Les exhorto a tener el bolígrafo y papel para hacer sus anotaciones y aprovechar al máximo esta sesión. Listo, profesor.
Vale. Procedo a compartir la clase. Okay, let's start and welcome to our last session. For the last session, we're gonna review what we discussed last class. In last session, we started talking about fantasy. The example we took was Alice in the Wonderland. So in that session, we also talk about and describe the main characters about Alice in the Wonderland. So today we're gonna continue working on the same topic, but we're gonna go deeper into the analysis of this novel. So let's start by talking about some takeaways. Takeaways are important information, very summarized information about a written work. So from this takeaway, we have the following important information. The first one, it's the author Lewis Carroll first told the story to the 10 years old Alice Little, his colleague's daughter. The second one, the story absurd nature, hilarious puns, and verbal soundscape make it an outstanding example of the nonsense literature that was so popular in the mid-19th century England. So it makes emphasis that around the 19th century, the literature or the authors that create and wrote novels in that area, they usually wrote about nonsense. Nonsense, in other words, fantasy. I will give you an example of nonsense. I can say that an example of it, I can say, for example, animals talking, traveling around time, you know, like having a time machine, things like that. Those stuff were so popular back then. Remember that also back then in the 19th century, we also saw the island treasure. This is another example of this nonsense. Even when the island treasure, if you remember, the island treasure was more about an action novel, because it was about pirates and that stuff, and we want to know what's coming next. In this one, in the Alice in the Wonderland, if you see, this is a complete fantasy. That is something that is not real, an idea that wasn't taken from the real life. It was just in this one, the author want to leave his imagination flies and see what happen, mixing all of those ingredients in this recipe, recipe. The third one, the French surrealist later saw Carol's style as an expression of the free subconscious mind. The trivialized 1951 Disney adaptation continues to shape most people's misleading impression of an ideal and harmonious wonderland to this day. Remember that Disney also made this story so popular nowadays because Disney first showed this story on radio and on TV. That's why Alice in the Wonderland becomes so popular and almost everybody know and heard about it. The last one, how do you know I'm mad? Said Alice. You must be, said the cat, or you wouldn't have come here. So basically, we can see lots of interactions between Alice and the animals around them. Remember that the story started Alice chasing a rabbit. So the rabbit hide inside of a rabbit hole. So Alice go back the rabbit, and she fell into the hole. And when she fell, it she was like moving to a different place, to a different land. That's why the Wonderland. When she wake up and she couldn't escape from that, was when she realized that she was in another dimension, in a different dimension, where animals can talk, and many things happen to her at the very beginning of the story. Probably it is something that makes the story very interesting. Okay, now let's continue with Alice Sholborn. So a little later, the rabbit returns, demanding that she give back his gloves at once. Having lost the gloves, Alice decides to search for them. While looking for the gloves, she comes upon a little house and steps in, driving by curiosity. She takes a sip from yet another bottle and suddenly grows so big that her arm sticks out the house and one leg goes up the chimney. The rabbit decides to send Bill the lizard through the chimney to fetch his glove. Alice hears Bill scrambling above her and with a sharp kick sends the lizard flying the other way like a rocket. This infuriates the rabbits so much that he decided to burn down the house. Alice threatens to send her cat Dina, who is at home with her parents after rabbit, but to no avail. That's what happened with the rabbit. That is a part of the story that take place in this novel between Alice and the rabbit. Remember that the story begin with those two characters. Something that called my attention that is also important to share is that in this fantasy, the characters are not necessarily humans or people. They can be plants, they can be animals, and they are characters too. So in this one, we can see that the characters are Alice, the rabbit, the cat, the lizard, and they are not, they are animals, but they are characters in this story. That is something important to restate here. Okay, let's continue. The rabbit throws pebbles at her that turn into cakes, and after eating one of them, she begins shrinking again. Now she can free herself and flee into the woods. She finds herself too small yet again and comes upon the caterpillar who is sitting on the mushroom smoking a long hookah. Remember at the beginning, Alice has to pass through a door, but she was too big to go through. Then she started crying, 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 and then after she drank something, she become too small that she couldn't reach the door handle to open the door. So she drinks again the she get against the drink, but she was too tall, too high that she couldn't pass through the door. That's why also it's talk about, if you see, it's like a link about the events that took place, the things that happened to Alice at the very beginning of the story. Okay, let's see this another character, the cat. In this one, the grinning cat. The Duke's cook is busy preparing a pepper soup, but she suddenly starts hurling plates and saucepans at the head of the Duchess, who is rocking a baby to sleep, although the Duchess is rather ungracious toward Alice. She quickly tosses the child to her, and Alice runs outside for fear of being hit by an object the cook has thrown. In her arms, the baby increasingly takes on the future of a piglet. Finally, she puts it down and the creature struts away, grunting. This one. What do you think about this quote? A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were three gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Let's take some time and then we're going to discuss the meaning of this quote. Para que me colabore con su nombre y cédula, por favor, me lo escriba en el mensaje para que se genere el reporte. Okay, let's continue. Alice now talks with the Duke's Cheshire cat, who has the disconcerting habit of disappearing. The cat is constantly grinning, and when Alice complains of how rapidly it keeps vanishing, disappear, in other words, slowly from tail to head, leaving just its lingering grin. Shortly thereafter, the grill meets the March hare, who is having tea under a tree with the Mad Hatter, and they have a sleep half awake dormouse. While many empty places are set at the table, the three are squeezed next to each other at one end. They give Alice a rather rude welcome, constantly complaining about her manners. In turn, she reprimands her host for not inviting her to sit when there are so many places. Lively and frustrating discussion ensues on the subject of time, intermixed with riddles that lack solutions. Now let's see the interpretation of Alice in the Wonderland. Let's see the first one. Lewis Carroll hides social criticism in a tale. The bizarre creatures of Wonderland reflect typical behavioral pattern of the adult world, including an exaggerated fidelity to principles and an utter lack of self-doubt and self-criticism. Another interpretation is that Alice's adventures in Wonderland can be read as a parable of education crisis in the 19th century, which was based on widespread authoricism. Alice's schooling helps her to debunk many of the absurd convictions held by the curious inhabitants of Wonderland. Yet it is not her book knowledge that gets her through her adventures unharmed, but her childlike impartiality and unprejudiced readiness to embrace the unknown. The Wonderland creatures keep asking Alice about her identity, a question that the girl has great difficulties answering. It shows that people's backgrounds and prestige often trump their character and skills. This is probably a message of this. The identity dilemma is also a symbol of puberty and the tragic loss of childhood. Alice goes through grotesque growth spurts and disproportional physical changes that bewilder her. She feels ridiculous and utterly out of place. Not a child anymore, but also not yet an adult. So she's in the process of becoming an adult. In other words, not a get, not yet a woman. She comes to learn that life is a puzzle without meaning. She tries hard to find some purpose and answer in Wonderland, but in vain. Even the riddles and games of logic defy all expectation, leading to ever more confusion, frustration, and nonsense. This one, and the last question. What do you think about Alice in the Wonderland? I totally agree with you. Yes, it's a symbolism that remark the literature of the 19th century. Uh, if we analyze the literature back then, probably it was a literature that 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 has little of sense, but it's very interesting. It's one of my favorite too. And also, if you know, Alice in the Wonderland has become one of the most uh, famous written tale, actually, in the present. So this is all for this session. Remember that you have 1 week from now to develop the activities, do the test, participate on the forum, because I am going to be evaluating the whole course next Monday, so you can get your final evaluation. So my recommendation is, if you haven't finished working on the platform, the activities, you have until next Monday to fulfill all the activities that you have on the platform. So it was a pleasure to share this moment with you. Hope you are doing well, and I see you in coming courses. Listo.
Listo, profesor. Bueno, paso por acá también para recordarles que hoy es nuestra última clase de literatura infantil y a los estudiantes pues se les invita a llenar el tema de la autovaloración estudiantil. La misma tiene un valor del 5% de su nota final. Va a estar habilitada a partir de esta clase durante 7 días. Eh, Profesor, si no tenemos más consultas o aportes, podemos dar como finalizada la sesión de la noche de hoy. Tengan todos una excelente noche.
Vale, gracias.